Well, good morning, and I trust you're all doing well. Are you thirsty? Are you thirsty this morning? Thirst is an interesting topic. Come, all who are thirsty. Well, we've discovered over the past few years that regular intake of water is more important than we ever imagined that it would be. And people are being encouraged to drink more and more. Sheila's always encouraging me to drink more and more water. In fact, that's the reason why I have this and this and this and this and why in our cars most of the time and right by the door when we leave the house we have a case of this. Water is important. The fact is 60% of our body is made up of water. You can only live 3 to 5 days without water. In contrast, you can live 3 weeks without food. Mahatma Gandhi went 21 days during a hunger strike and survived. Water does a lot of things to our body. Some of them I don't think we ever stop to think about or realize, but water obviously flushes waste from our bodies. Water also regulates our body's temperatures. Water aids in digestion. Water helps brain function. So maybe if you're having a brain cramp, you need to drink a little bit more water. Water protects body tissue and it lubricates the joints. Water improves blood oxygen circulation. And according to the National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, people need 15.5 cups of water each day. If you're a man, that equals 125 ounces. If you are a lady, you need 11.5 cups of water or 91 ounces per day. And you may need to increase that if it's real hot out or if you're doing some physical exercise. These experts who have determined this recommend 3 things to help you deal with the idea of keeping hydrated. They say you need to carry water with you wherever you go. You need to keep track of your intake. I was talking to my cousin's wife the other day, and she has a program, a regimen that she sticks to every day so that she drinks 100 ounces of water every day. And she kind of told me her time schedule on that, and she sticks to it every day, whether she's at home, at work, or on vacation. The third thing is pace yourself so that you have regular consumption. And I think the topic of thirst is an important one. It certainly is one we need to take seriously. And not only is it a topic that's relevant for us today physically, but the Bible talks about thirst as well. The word thirst appears over 60 times in the Bible. Sometimes it's thirst, sometimes it's thirsty, sometimes it's thirst with an S on the end, and sometimes it's actually translated parched. It has the meaning of the desire for thirst. In Psalm chapter 42, in verse 2, I think this is probably a passage that's familiar to many, but it says there, in David's writing, I thirst for God, for the living God. When can I come and appear before God? In Psalm 63 and verse 1, David also writing, at a time when he was in the wilderness, time of isolation for him, time when he was on the run. And there he writes, God, you are my God. I eagerly seek you. I thirst for you. My body faints for you in a land that is dry, desolate, and without water. In the book of Isaiah, chapter 55, and verse 1, Isaiah there is calling the people of God to return to him, to have their spiritual thirst quenched. And he says there, "Come everyone who is thirsty." Thirsty for God is what he's talking about. Come to the waters. And you without money, come, buy and eat. Come, buy wine and milk without money and without cost. You see, the water of life is free. Come, everyone who is thirsty. Then in Psalm 46, or 143 and verse 6, David again says this, "At a time when he was on the run, I spread out my hands to you. I am like parched land before you." And that's that time the same word is used. It's the word sama, the word for thirst, thirsty, or thirst, or parched. "I am like parched land before you," David says. What he literally is saying is, God, I am thirsty for you. Israel is a very dry land. I had the opportunity to spend some time in what's known as the Grand Canyon of Israel. It's just a desert floor deep down in a canyon that goes for miles and miles and miles. There we spent some time with some Bedouins, and it was an interesting day, I might say, but it was dry. The sage brush, all dried up, was blowing around in the wind. Very little life down there in the desert. Israel is known for those types of regions. Dry, hot summers, especially in the Negev and in the wildernesses like the Grand Canyon. When people go there, they know they will be thirsty. They will be dry. They will be parched. And so they need to be prepared to take water with them to keep themselves hydrated. But back in these days, when David was on the run, it wasn't as easy as it is today. In fact, in Psalm 69, David says this about a time he was captured by his enemies. And it says, "Instead, they gave me gall for food." And I've always wondered what gall was. We hear about it in the Bible, and basically it is something that is very bitter. Sometimes it is from a plant. Sometimes it is bile from an animal. But they were feeding David that. Then he says, "And for my thirst, they gave me vinegar to drink." Vinegar increases one's thirst. Can you imagine being hot, dry, parched, running in the desert, living in the wilderness, being captured by the enemy? They force you to eat gall and to drink vinegar. But probably one of the most familiar passages is the passage that I alluded to earlier in Psalm 42. I want to read the first 4 verses of that this morning. Again, I think it's familiar to you. "As the deer longs for streams of water, so I long for you, God. I thirst for God, the living God. When can I come and appear before God? My tears have been my food day and night. Well, all day long people say to me, 'Where is your God?' I remember this. I pour out my heart, how I walked with many, leading the festival procession to the house of God with joyful shouts of thanksgiving." David had been chased from his palace, from his hometown, Jerusalem, by those trying to kill him. He's missing his home. He's missing his people. But more than anything else, he's missing his time in worship with God's people. And he pours out his heart before the Lord. As a deer is chased from their familiar surroundings by a hunter, and they lose sight of their watering holes and the places of shade, David also feels like that prey being hunted. It's not for lack of H2O that has him thirsty. It's lack of spiritual worship and fellowship. and opportunities for him to grow closer to his God. He misses those times of church, if you will. He's thirsty for the celebration of God. He's thirsty for the fellowship with one another. He's thirsty for opportunities to know God better and to fall before him, to offer sacrifices of praise to his God. Well, as I was thinking about this and thinking about what the experts had to say, I come to realize that the three things that they mention about keeping hydrating are the same things that we need to keep in mind to satisfy our thirst spiritually. The first one is they said to carry water with you. And so I'm going to translate that for us this morning into these words. Take God with you wherever you go. David said in Psalm 121, I lift up my eyes to the mountain. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, maker of heaven and earth. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, he who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. The Lord will watch over your coming and your going, both now and forevermore. Take God with you wherever you go. As I said before, Sheila's always reminding me, take this water jug with you, take this water bottle with you, make sure you keep drinking. That's your source of hydration. Well, David understands he needs to take God with him, even in the desert places. God is his resource for trouble. He needs to have a God consciousness, so he can come to a state of worship wherever he is, whether he is in the desert, whether he's living in a cave, if he's running from his enemies, or even if he's home in the palace. He needs to have a God consciousness. And I think we can learn from that. As we need to take water with us, carry water wherever we go, we need to take God with us wherever we go as well. The second thing is this. We need to keep track of our intake. Let me suggest keeping a daily journal or a diary of your spiritual journey. Psalm 1 says, Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers, but whose delight is in the law of the Lord, and who meditates on his law day and night. We need to keep a daily journal or diary of our spiritual journey. We need to have the discipline to keep track of our relationship with God. We can't neglect time with him. We will get thirsty spiritually. A couple of years ago, I was hunting out by Jake's, and I left the house while it was still dark. It was cold. It was Thanksgiving morning, and I had bundled up, and I had put a couple of power bars in my coat pocket, but didn't have anything else with me other than my gun. And I went up into the mountain behind the house, and I was there all day long, and sitting in blinds and on occasion moving, but basically out in the woods from sun up to sundown. Towards the end of that day, I felt very weak and very fatigued, and I thought, well, maybe it's just because I'm hungry, and I had eaten my power bars, but still, that feeling of just being weak and fatigued, and found it even difficult to walk the pace that I had been walking previously. Well, when I got back to camp that day, I went right into the dining hall, and there's a soda machine there, but one of the buttons is water. And I grabbed the biggest cup that was on the rack, I filled it with water, and I started drinking. I drank it. I filled it up again. I drank it again. And as I drank 2 or 3 glasses of water, not just guzzling it down, but taking it in as I could, I started feeling a whole lot better. My strength began to come back. That feeling of fatigue left me, and I realized I didn't have the intake all day long that I should have had. You know, the same thing happens to us spiritually, doesn't it? If we don't have a disciplined intake of the things of God, we become weak. We become fatigued spiritually. We need to keep taking in. And the third thing that we need to do is this. Remember, with water, we pace ourselves for regular consumption. Well, spiritually, we need to maintain a commitment of regular worship, fellowship, and growth opportunities. In Psalm 42, David realized that his spiritual dehydration came from the fact that he was missing out on his regular worship, his regular fellowship, and his regular growth opportunities. And he says, I remember when I poured out my heart, how I walked with the many, that's his times of fellowship, leading the festive processions, his great times of praise and worship, to the house of God with joyful and thankful shouts. You know, being intentional about our worship, fellowship, and growth opportunities might be more important now than ever before. Without the regular gatherings, we need to be intentional about getting our worship on, about gathering online, about connecting with one another by phone, by text, or by emails, or on things like Google Meets. And I encourage you to join us at 11 o'clock today. You need to listen to good worship music. Read the Thought for Today and other spiritual and biblical materials. Spend time meditating on God's Word and prayer. You need to have intake. You need to pace yourself, or you need to maintain that regular commitment. Day in and day out, week in and week out. We refer to Sunday as the day of worship, but really every day that God gives us should be a day of worship to some degree. And we should be engaged in those days. This is a day the Lord has made. Rejoice and be glad in it. So what is our takeaway today? It's very simple. Take God with you wherever you go. Keep God a part of your everyday life. And don't neglect opportunities, whatever they may be, for worship, fellowship, and growth. Quench your spiritual thirst. That's the bottom line for a time together today. Now, I have another song, and I'm going to come up and pause the video for a minute while we play this song, but it's the first Sunday of the month, and so this is our time to gather that cracker and that juice, and you can do that during this song, and then come back, and we're going to take the opportunity to have communion together.